The betrayal and capture. The twin suns of Zephyria cast long shadows across the bustling spaceport of Nova Prime. Amidst the crowd of diverse alien species, a slender figure with iridescent blue skin stood out. Lyra Starborn, her violet eyes scanning the area nervously, clutched a small bag containing all that remained of her once comfortable life. Lyra's heart raced as she recalled the events that had led her to this moment. Her father, a respected diplomat, had died unexpectedly 6 months ago. In the wake of his passing, Lyra's stepmother, Vex, had shown her true colors. The woman who had once showered Lyra with false affection now revealed a cold, calculating nature driven by greed. As Lyra made her way through the spaceport, her mind drifted to the conversation she had overheard the night before. Vex's voice, laced with malice, still echoed in her ears. "The girl is worth more to us sold than kept. The Crixian slavers will pay handsomely for a young Zephyrian. Once she's gone, we'll have full access to her father's accounts." Lyra had fled that very night, taking only what she could carry. Now, as she approached the public transport terminals, she dared to hope she might escape her stepmother's cruel plan. But fate had other ideas. A rough hand grabbed Lyra's arm, spinning her around. She found herself face to face with Grax, her stepmother's brutish bodyguard. His gravelly voice sent chills down her spine. "Thought you could run, little star. Vex doesn't let go of valuable assets so easily." Lyra struggled, her voice rising in panic. "Let me go. I'm not property to be sold." Her cries drew the attention of nearby travelers, but none dared intervene. The sight of Grax's Crixian uniform was enough to keep them at bay. The Crixian Imperium's reputation for brutality was well known throughout the galaxy. As Grax dragged Lyra towards a waiting shuttle, she caught sight of Vex emerging from the shadows. Her stepmother's face was a mask of cold triumph. "You should have known better than to run, Lyra," Vex sneered. "Your father's naive idealism clearly rubbed off on you. But don't worry, you'll learn your place soon enough." Lyra's world spun as she was shoved into the shuttle. The last thing she saw before the doors sealed was Vex's smirking face, a testament to the cruelty that had shattered her life. The journey that followed was a blur of fear and despair. Lyra found herself transported to a massive Crixian slave ship orbiting a distant moon. The vessel was a labyrinth of cold metal corridors and cramped cells, each housing dozens of unfortunate souls from across the galaxy. Lyra was stripped of her belongings, her clothes replaced with a drab grey jumpsuit that marked her as property. A harsh metal collar was lopped around her neck, its weight a constant reminder of her new status. In the days that followed, Lyra learned the brutal realities of life as a slave. The Crixians were not known for their gentleness, and any sign of defiance was met with swift punishment. But even as her body ached from long hours of grueling labor, Lyra's spirit remained unbroken. She found small comforts where she could. There was Zara, an elderly Andromedian, with 4 arms and eyes that sparkled with kindness despite years of hardship. Zara took Lyra under her wing, showing her how to navigate the complex social hierarchy of the slave decks. "Keep your head down, but your spirit high," Zara whispered one night as they huddled in their shared cell. "Freedom may seem impossible now, but hope has a way of finding even the darkest corners of the universe." Lyra clung to those words in the weeks that followed. She learned to survive, to blend in, to become invisible to the harsh eyes of the Crixian overseers. But she never stopped watching, waiting for any opportunity that might present itself. That opportunity came in the form of whispered rumors that spread like wildfire through the slave decks. Talk of a rogue human captain who had been raiding Crixian outposts, freeing slaves and striking fear into the hearts of the Imperium. "They say his ship appears out of nowhere," one slave murmured during the night cycle. "Like a ghost in the void, striking before the Crixians even know what hit them." Lyra's heart quickened at the tales. Could it be true? Was there really someone out there fighting against the Crixians' cruel empire? Her questions were answered sooner than she could have imagined. It was during a routine transfer to a mining colony that everything changed. The slave ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as explosions rocked its hull. Panic erupted on the slave decks. Guards rushed to battle stations, leaving their charges in chaos. Laura felt Zora's hand on her arm, the older woman's voice urgent. "This is it, child. If we're to have any chance, it's now." Together, they navigated the pandemonium, slipping past distracted guards and racing towards the escape pod bays. They weren't alone. Other slaves had the same idea, desperation lending them courage. As they rounded a corner, Laura collided with a tall figure clad in unfamiliar armor. Her heart leaped to her throat, certain they'd been caught. But instead the harsh grit of a Crixian guard, she felt a gentle hand steadying her. "Easy there," a warm human voice said. The figure's helmet retracted, revealing a man with kind eyes and a determined set to his jaw. "I'm Captain Elias Drake of the Starshot. We're here to get you out." Laura couldn't believe her ears. The stories were true. Hope, so long dormant, bloomed in her chest. "Pleased," he said, gesturing to the other slaves gathering around them. "There are hundreds more. We can't leave them behind." Elias nodded, his expression grim but resolute. "We won't. My crew is already working on disabling the ship's systems, but we need to move fast. The Crixians will have reinforcements on the way." What followed was a whirlwind of action. Laura found herself working alongside Elias and his crew, guiding slaves to escape pods and improvised shuttles. The human raiders moved with a precision that spoke of long experience, their technology far outstripping anything the Crixians possessed. As the last of the slaves were evacuated, Laura paused at the airlock of Elias's ship. She looked back at the Crixian vessel, now a floating wreck. It was hard to believe that just hours ago it had been her prison, a symbol of hopelessness. Now it represented something else entirely, the first step towards freedom. Elias appeared at her side, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder, ready to leave this all behind. Laura took a deep breath, then nodded. As she stepped into the Starshot, she felt the weight of her ordeal begin to lift. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in months, it held promise. The ship's engines hummed to life, and Lyra watched through a viewport as they accelerated away from the destroyed slave ship. Stars streaked by, each one a beacon of possibility. She didn't know what challenges lay ahead, or how she would build a new life from the ashes of the old. But as she stood there, surrounded by the unlikeliest of saviors, Lyra knew one thing for certain: her journey was far from over. It was, in fact, only just beginning. A glimmer of hope in the darkness. The Starshot cruised through the inky blackness of space, its sleek hull a stark contrast to the bulky Crixian vessels Lyra had grown accustomed to. As she stood in the ship's observation deck, watching distant stars drift by, Laura felt a strange mix of relief and unease. Freedom, so long denied, now stretched before her like an unexplored galaxy. Captain Elias Drake found her there, lost in thought. He approached quietly, giving her time to notice his presence. When Lyra turned to face him, Elias offered a warm smile. "How are you holding up?" he asked, his voice gentle. Lyra considered the question. "I'm not sure," she admitted. "Grateful, certainly, but also overwhelmed," Elias suggested. When Lyra nodded, he continued, "It's a common feeling among those we rescue. You've been through a traumatic experience, and suddenly everything's changed again. It's okay to feel unsettled." His understanding brought unexpected tears to Lyra's eyes. She blinked them away, not wanting to appear weak. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias leaned against the railing beside her, his gaze fixed on the stars outside. "That's up to you," he said. "We're heading to a safe haven, a hidden colony where former slaves can recover and decide their next steps. Some choose to stay and build new lives there. Others join our crew or find passage to other worlds." The idea of choice, after so long being denied any agency, was both thrilling and terrifying to Lyra. "And what about the Crixians?" she asked. "Won't they come after us?" A determined look crossed Elias's face. "They'll try," he said. "But the Starshot isn't your average ship. We've got technology that keeps us off their scanners, and a crew that's dedicated to fighting the Imperium's cruelty." As if on cue, an alarm blared through the ship. Elias straightened, his hand going to the communicator at his belt. "Drake here. What's our status?" A voice crackled through the device. "Captain, we've picked up a distress signal. It's coming from a small transport ship, about half a light year off our current course." Elias's brow furrowed. "Any sign of Crixian activity in the area?" "Negative, sir, but the signal's weak. Whatever happened, it wasn't recent." Lara watched as Elias considered the information. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the desire to help warring with the need to ensure the safety of those already under his protection. Finally, Elias nodded. "Set a course," he ordered. "But keep us at yellow alert. I want to be ready for anything." As Elias turned to leave, Laura found herself speaking up. "I want to help," she said, surprising herself with her own boldness. Elias paused, studying her with a mix of concern and admiration. "Are you sure? You've been through a lot already." Lyra stood straighter, feeling a spark of her old determination returning. "I am," she said firmly. "I can't just sit by while others might be in danger, not when I know what that feels like." A slow smile spread across Elias's face. "All right," he agreed, "but you stay close to me, understood? I promise to keep you safe, and I intend to honor that." As they made their way to the bridge, Laura felt a surge of purpose. For so long, she had been helpless, at the mercy of others. Now she had a chance to make a difference. The bridge of the Starshot was a hive of activity. Crew members, human and alien alike, worked at various stations, their focus intense. Laura marveled at the advanced technology surrounding her, so different from the crude, brutal efficiency of Crixian ships. "Report," Elias called as he strode to the captain's chair. A tall, willowy alien with silver skin, Lyra would later learn she was an Etherian named Zix, turned from her console. "We're approaching the source of the distress signal, Captain. It's a small transport vessel, Terran in origin. Life support systems are failing, but I'm detecting multiple life signs aboard." Elias nodded grimly. "Any sign of what caused their distress?" Another crew member, a burly human woman with close-cropped hair, spoke up. "Scans show damage consistent with a meteor strike, sir. Their hull's been breached in multiple locations." "Understood. Prepare for rescue operations. I want a medical team standing by in the docking bay." As the crew rushed to comply with Elias's orders, Laura found herself drawn to a view screen showing the damaged ship. It was a pitiful sight, its hull scarred and dark, debris floating around it like a shroud. "Those poor people," she murmured. Elias glanced at her, his expression softening. "We'll do everything we can for them," he assured her. Then, to the crew, "Bring us alongside. Nice and easy." The next hour was a flurry of activity. Laura watched in awe as the Starshot's crew executed a flawless rescue operation. They extended a docking tube, stabilized the damaged ship's atmosphere, and began evacuating the survivors. To her surprise, Elias invited Lyra to accompany him to the medical bay where the rescued passengers were being treated. "Sometimes," he explained as they walked, "seeing a friendly face can make all the difference, especially one that understands what it's like to be saved from a desperate situation." In the medical bay, Lyra's heart went out to the shell-shocked survivors. There were a dozen of them, humans of various ages, all bearing the marks of their ordeal. She found herself drawn to a young girl, no more than 10 years old, who sat alone on one of the beds, her eyes wide with fear. Approaching slowly, Lyra knelt beside the bed. "Hello," she said softly. "My name's Lyra. What's yours?" The girl regarded her warily for a moment before answering in a whisper, "Mira." Lyra smiled encouragingly. "That's a beautiful name, Mira. Are you hurt anywhere?" Mira shook her head, then hesitated. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Our ship, it just fell apart around us. I thought we were going to die. I know it was frightening, Lyra said, her voice gentle. But you're safe now. Captain Drake and his crew, they're good people. They saved me too, not long ago. Mira's eyes widened with interest. They did. From what? Lyra paused, considering how much to share. From some very bad people who had taken me away from my home, she said finally. I was scared too, just like you are now. But being here, on this ship with these people, it's helped me remember that there's still good in the universe. As she spoke, Lyra realized the truth in her own words. The Starshot wasn't just a ship, it was a beacon of hope in a galaxy that often seemed cold and uncaring. Mira seemed to relax a little, her small hand reaching out to grasp Lyra's. Will you stay with me? She asked. Just for a little while. Lyra felt her heart swell with a protective instinct she hadn't known she possessed. Of course, she said, settling onto the bed beside Mira. I'll stay as long as you need. From across the room, Elias watched the interaction with a thoughtful expression. He'd seen something in Lyra from the moment they'd met, a resilience, a compassion that even slavery couldn't extinguish. Now, seeing her comfort Mira, he knew his instincts had been right. As the Starshot resumed its journey, now with a dozen more souls under its protection, Lyra felt a sense of purpose growing within her. She had been given a second chance, rescued from a life of despair. Now, perhaps, she could play a part in offering that same hope to others. The path ahead was still uncertain, fraught with dangers she could only begin to imagine. The Crixian Imperium's reach was vast, and their thirst for vengeance against those who defied them was legendary. But as Lyra sat with Mira, offering what comfort she could, she knew she'd found something worth fighting for. In the depths of space, aboard a ship of unlikely heroes, Lyra Starborn had discovered a new family, a new mission. The girl who had once been betrayed and sold into slavery was gone. In her place stood someone stronger, someone determined to make a difference in a galaxy crying out for change. As the Starshot's engines hummed, carrying them towards an uncertain future, Lyra made a silent vow. She would repay the kindness shown to her. She would stand against the darkness that had nearly consumed her, and no matter the cost, she would help bring hope to those who, like her, had once believed all hope was lost. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with peril, but for the first time since her father's death, Lyra felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With her new family beside her and a fire of determination burning in her heart, she knew that anything was possible. The stars streaked by outside, each one a promise of adventures yet to come. And Lyra, once a prisoner of despair, now stood tall, ready to embrace her destiny among the stars. Escape and alliance. Days melted into weeks aboard the Starshot as it journeyed towards a safe haven Elias had promised. For Lyra, each passing moment brought new discoveries and a growing sense of belonging. She found herself drawn into the ship's daily routines, eager to learn and contribute however she could. Elias, recognizing Lyra's potential, began to involve her in more aspects of the ship's operations. She trained with Zix, the Etherian navigator, learning to read star charts and plot courses through the treacherous space lanes. The ship's engineer, a gruff but kind-hearted human named Raj, took her under his wing, teaching her the intricacies of the Starshot's advanced systems. But it was in the medical bay, working alongside Dr. Lena Chen, that Lyra truly found her calling. The compassion she had shown Mira wasn't a one-time occurrence. Lyra had a natural gift for comforting the rescued slaves and refugees that frequently came aboard, her own experiences allowing her to connect with them in ways the others couldn't. You have a healer's touch, Dr. Chen told her one day as they treated a group of former miners rescued from a Crixian labor camp. It's not just about mending bodies, you heal spirits too. Lyra blushed at the praise, but she couldn't deny the sense of fulfillment she felt in this work. For the first time since her father's death, she felt like she was making a real difference. As Lyra grew more confident in her new role, she also began to forge deeper connections with the crew. Zix, with her otherworldly grace and dry wit, became a close friend. Raj, for all his gruffness, treated her like a daughter, always ready with a terrible joke or a comforting word when she needed it most. And then there was Elias. The captain remained something of an enigma, his kind demeanor masking a deep well of determination, and Lyra suspected pain. She often caught him looking at her with a mixture of pride and concern, as if he saw something in her that both excited and worried him. It was during a quiet moment in the observation deck, nearly a month into their journey, that Elias finally opened up to her. "You remind me of someone," he said, his gaze fixed on the stars outside. "My sister, Aria. She had the same fire in her eyes, the same drive to help others." Laura listened, sensing the weight behind his words. "What happened to her?" she asked gently. Elias's jaw tightened. The Crixians happened. She was on a medical mission to a border world when they attacked. I couldn't get to her in time. Understanding dawned on Lyra. "That's why you do this," she said. "Why you risk everything to save others?" Elias nodded, a sad smile touching his lips. Aria always believed in the goodness of people, even in the darkest times. "I couldn't save her, but I can honor her memory by continuing her work." As Lyra absorbed this, alarms suddenly blared throughout the ship. Elias straightened, all trace of vulnerability vanishing as he snapped into captain mode. "Bridge report," he barked into his communicator. Zix's voice came through, tense but controlled. "Multiple Crixian warships on an intercept course, Captain. They found us." Lyra's heart raced as she followed Elias to the bridge. The main view screen showed 3 massive Crixian battlecruisers bearing down on them, their sleek, predatory shapes a stark reminder of the danger they faced. "How did they find us?" Reg demanded, his hands flying over his console as he diverted power to the shields. "Unknown," Zix replied, "but they're jamming our communications and charging weapons." Elias's face was grim as he took in the situation. "Options." "We can't outrun them," Zix said, "and we're outgunned. Even with our advanced tech, we can't take on 3 battlecruisers." Lyra's mind raced. They couldn't be captured, not now. Not when they come so far. An idea struck her, born of countless hours studying star charts with Zix. "The Maelstrom," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. All eyes turned to her. "We're near the Cygnus Maelstrom, aren't we?" A ship our size might be able to navigate it, but those battlecruisers would be torn apart. Elias and Zix exchanged a look. The Maelstrom was a treacherous region of space, a swirling vortex of gravitational eddies and cosmic storms. It was suicide to attempt passage, but it might be their only chance. "It's risky," Elias said, a note of admiration in his voice. "But it just might work. Zix, plot a course. Raj, give us everything the engines have got." What followed was the most harrowing experience of Lyra's life. The Starshot plunged into the Maelstrom, its hull groaning under the immense gravitational forces. Lightning-like energy discharges crackled across the view screen as Zix guided them through the chaos with preternatural skill. Behind them, one of the Crixian ships attempted to follow, only to be caught in a gravitic shear that tore it in half. The other 2 fell back, unwilling to risk the same fate. For hours, they navigated the treacherous currents of the Maelstrom. Lyra found herself at Zix's side, calling out readings and helping to calculate minute course corrections. It was terrifying, exhilarating work, requiring every ounce of concentration she possessed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they emerged on the other side. The view screen showed clear space ahead, no sign of their pursuers. A cheer went up from the crew, the release of tension palpable. Elias clapped Lyra on the shoulder, his eyes shining with pride. "Quick thinking back there," he said. "You may have saved us all." As the adrenaline faded, Lyra felt a profound shift within herself. She was no longer just a passenger, a rescued slave finding her way. She was part of this crew, this family, and she was ready to stand with them, whatever challenges lay ahead. In the days that followed, as they made repairs and plotted their next move, Laura found herself taking on more responsibility. She worked tirelessly, splitting her time between the medical bay and the bridge, eager to learn everything she could. One evening, as she sat with Elias in his ready room, discussing their options, he surprised her with a question. "How would you feel about making this official?" he asked. "Joining the crew, I mean. Not just as a helper, but as a full member. We could use someone with your skills and insight." Laura felt a surge of emotion. This was more than just a job offer. It was an invitation to be part of something greater, to make a real difference in the lives of others. "I'd be honored," she said, her voice thick with feeling. Elias smiled, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small box and opened it, revealing a gleaming insignia, the emblem of the Starshot's crew. "Welcome aboard, Officer Starborn," he said as he handed it to her. As Lyra pinned the insignia to her shirt, she felt a sense of coming home. The lost, frightened girl sold into slavery was gone. In her place stood a woman ready to face the challenges ahead, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves. The Starshot hummed around her, a ship of hope cutting through the darkness of space. And Lyra Starborn, once a victim of cruelty, now stood as a beacon of resilience and compassion, ready to bring light to the shadowed corners of the galaxy. The journey ahead would be dangerous, filled with battles both physical and moral. But as Lyra looked at her new family, Elias, Zix, Raj, Dr. Chen, and all the others, she knew that together they could face anything the universe threw at them. The stars beckoned, each one a promise of adventures to come. And Lyra, her heart full of purpose and hope, was ready to answer their call. The journey to freedom. The weeks following Lyra's official induction into the Starshot's crew were a whirlwind of activity. Their narrow escape from the Crixian battlecruisers had proven that the Imperium's reach was growing, and with it, the urgency of their mission. Elias called a meeting of the senior crew, Lyra now included among them. As they gathered around the holographic display in the ship's war room, the gravity of their situation became clear. "The Crixians are expanding their slave operations," Elias said, his face grim as he pulled out a star map dotted with red markers. "These are confirmed locations of new processing centers and labor camps. They're pushing into sectors that were once considered neutral space." Zix, her silver skin shimmering under the room's lights, leaned forward. "If this continues, there won't be any safe havens left. We're running out of places to take the people we rescue." Lyra studied the map, her heart heavy. Each of those red dots represented countless lives destroyed, families torn apart. She thought of her own experience, of the fear and hopelessness she had felt. "There has to be something we can do," she said, her voice soft but determined. Raj, the ship's engineer, scratched his beard thoughtfully. "We've been playing defense for too long," he growled. "Maybe it's time we took the fight to them." A tense silence fell over the room. What Raj was suggesting was dangerous, potentially suicidal. The Starshot was just one ship, after all, going up against an empire. But Elias was nodding slowly, a spark of something, hope, perhaps, or determination, igniting in his eyes. "You're right," he said. "We can't keep running forever. It's time we made a real difference." Over the next few hours, a plan began to take shape. It was audacious, perhaps even foolhardy, but it offered a chance to strike a real blow against the Crixian slave trade. The target was a massive space station orbiting a gas giant in the Cerberus system. Intelligence gathered from rescued slaves and intercepted communications indicated it was a central hub for the Crixians' operations in the sector, coordinating slave transports and processing new captives. "If we can take it out," Elias explained, "we'll disrupt their entire network in this region. It could buy us the breathing room we need to establish a more permanent sanctuary for the people we rescue." The plan was multifaceted and would require every member of the crew to play their part. Zix would use her unparalleled navigation skills to plot a course through the gas giant's treacherous ring system, allowing them to approach undetected. Raj and his engineering team would modify the Starshot's systems to mask their energy signature, making them appear as nothing more than a piece of floating debris. Dr. Chen and her medical team, including Lyra, would prepare for the inevitable casualties, both among the crew and the slaves they hoped to rescue. And a small strike team, led by Elias himself, would infiltrate the station to plant explosives at key structural points. As the others filed out to begin preparations, Elias held Lyra back. "I have a special task for you," he said, his expression serious. "You've shown an incredible ability to connect with the people we rescue. I need you to be ready to help coordinate the evacuation of any slaves we find on that station. It's going to be chaotic, and they'll need someone they can trust to guide them." Lyra felt the weight of the responsibility settling on her shoulders, but she stood tall, meeting Elias's gaze. "I won't let you down," she promised. The next few days were a frenzy of preparation. Lyra divided her time between the medical bay, helping Dr. Chen stockpile supplies, and working with Zix to memorize the layout of the Crixian station. She knew that lives would depend on her ability to navigate those corridors quickly and efficiently. As the day of the operation dawned, a tense quiet fell over the Starshot. Lyra found herself in the observation deck, watching as they approached the massive gas giant that would hide their approach. The planet's swerving storms and vibrant bands of color would have been beautiful under other circumstances. Now, they just reminded her of the chaos they were about to unleash. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Mira, the young girl they had rescued weeks ago. Mira had become something of a little sister to Lyra, always eager to help and learn. "Are you scared?" Mira asked, her young face serious. Lyra considered the question. "A little," she admitted. "But sometimes we have to face our fears to help others. That's what real courage is." Mira nodded solemnly. "I want to be brave like you when I grow up." Lyra felt a lump form in her throat. She knelt down, meeting Mira's eyes. "You already are brave," she said softly. "You survived something terrible, and you're still here, still smiling. That's real strength." Their moment was interrupted by Elias's voice over the ship-wide comm. "All hands, prepare for approach. We're going in." What followed was the most intense experience of Lyra's life. The Starshot weaved through the gas giant's rings, debris pinging off their shields as Zix guided them with preternatural skill. As they emerged on the other side, the Crixian station loomed before them, a massive structure of metal and malice. Everything happened in a blur after that. Alarms blared as they were inevitably detected. Elias and his strike team launched in a specially modified shuttle, streaking towards the station as the Starshot engaged the Crixian defense ships. Lyra found herself in the thick of the action, coordinating with Zix to guide escaped slaves to emergency airlocks where Starshot shuttles waited to evacuate them. The station shook with explosions as Elias's team did their work, and Lyra knew their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. As she led a group of terrified aliens through a smoke-filled corridor, Lyra came face to face with a Crixian guard. For a moment, she froze, memories of her own captivity threatening to overwhelm her. But then she heard Mira's voice in her head. "I want to be brave like you." With a cry, Lyra charged forward, using the hand-to-hand combat techniques Elias had taught her. The guard, surprised by her ferocity, went down hard. Lyra didn't wait to see if he got up, ushering the slaves forward towards freedom. Just when it seemed they couldn't hold out any longer, Elias's voice crackled over the comm. "Charges are set. Everyone, fall back to extraction points now." The retreat was as chaotic as the assault had been. Lyra found herself on one of the last shuttles to leave the station, watching through the viewport as the massive structure began to break apart. The Starshot was there, battered but unbroken, its cargo holds filled with hundreds of newly freed slaves. As they jumped to light speed, leaving the exploding station behind, a cheer went up throughout the ship. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a major blow against the Crixian slave trade. In the aftermath, As Lyra helped tend to the wounded and comfort the rescued, she felt a profound sense of accomplishment. This was what she had been meant for, she realized. Not to be a victim, but a savior. A beacon of hope in a galaxy that so desperately needed it. Elias found her later, as things were finally calming down. He looked exhausted but satisfied. "You did good out there, Starborn," he said, genuine pride in his voice. "I knew I could count on you." Lyra smiled, feeling a warmth in her chest at his words. "What happens now?" she asked. Elias's gaze turned to the stars outside. Now we keep going. There are still people out there who need us. And thanks to what we did today, we've got a real chance to make a lasting difference." As Lyra looked out at the star-streaked vista of hyperspace, she felt a sense of purpose stronger than anything she had ever known. The journey ahead would be long and fraught with danger, but she was ready for it. With her new family beside her and the fire of determination burning in her heart, Lyra Starborn was ready to face whatever the galaxy had in store. The starshot sped on, carrying hope and freedom to the far reaches of space. And Lyra, once a slave herself, now stood as a symbol of resilience and compassion, ready to light the way for others trapped in darkness. Confronting the past. The success of the starshot's raid on the Crixian slave hub had far-reaching consequences. As news of the destruction spread through underground channels, it ignited a spark of hope in oppressed communities across the sector. The starshot and its crew became legends, whispered about in the shadows of labor camps and in the crowded holds of slave ships. For Lyra, the months that followed were a whirlwind of rescue missions, narrow escapes, and the continual challenge of helping former slaves rebuild their lives. The starshot had become more than just a ship. It was the center of a growing network of resistance against the Crixian Imperium. But even as they celebrated their victories, a shadow loomed on the horizon. The Crixians, enraged by the destruction of their hub, had intensified their efforts to hunt down the starshot and its crew. Each mission became more dangerous, the margin for error razor-thin. It was during a rare moment of quiet, as the ship drifted in the concealing nebula of the Vale Nursery, that Lyra's past came crashing back into her present. She was in the medical bay, inventorying supplies with Dr. Chen, when Zix's voice came over the intercom, tense and urgent. "Lyra, you're needed on the bridge, immediately." Exchanging a worried glance with Dr. Chen, Lyra hurried through the ship's corridors. When she arrived on the bridge, she found the senior crew gathered around the main view screen, their faces grim. Elias turned to her, his expression a mix of concern and anger. "We've intercepted a transmission," he said without preamble. "I think you need to see this." The screen flickered to life, and Lyra felt her blood run cold. There, larger than life, was the face of her stepmother, Vex. She looked older, harder, her eyes glittering with malice. Offering a substantial reward for information leading to the capture of the terrorist vessel known as the Starshot, Vex was saying, her voice as cold as Lyra remembered. "But I have a personal message for one member of their crew. Lyra Starborn, I know you're out there. Did you think you could escape your past so easily? Did you think I would forget? I haven't. I'm coming for you, little star. And this time, there will be no escape." The transmission cut off, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Lyra stood frozen, her mind reeling. She had known, intellectually, that Vex was still out there, but to see her, to hear her voice again, it brought all the old fears rushing back. Elias stepped forward, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "Lyra, talk to us. What does this mean?" Taking a deep breath, Lyra forced herself to focus. She owed her new family the truth. "Vex, she was my stepmother," she explained, her voice shaky but growing stronger as she spoke. "She's the one who sold me into slavery, and now she's working with the Crixians." The implications hung heavy in the air. Vex's knowledge of Lyra, combined with the resources of the Crixian Imperium, made her a deadly threat. "We need to disappear," Raj growled. "Find a hole and pull it in after us." But Lyra was shaking her head. a new resolve hardening within her. "No," she said firmly. "We can't keep running. Vex won't stop, and neither will the Crixians. We need to face this threat head-on." Elias studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "What do you suggest?" "We use me as bait," Lara said, the plan forming even as she spoke. "Let Vex think she's found me. Draw her out, along with whatever Crixian forces she's aligned with, and then we spring the trap." The next few days were a frenzy of preparation. The plan was audacious, bordering on insane, but it was their best chance to neutralize a threat Vex posed and strike another blow against the Crixian slave trade. Lyra found herself at the center of it all, working closely with Elias and Zix to coordinate every aspect of the operation. They chose their battleground carefully, an abandoned mining outpost on a small moon, its twisting corridors and unstable caverns perfect for an ambush. As the day of reckoning approached, Lyra felt a storm of emotions raging within her. Fear, yes, but also a burning determination. Vex had stolen her past, had tried to steal her future. It was time to end this, once and for all. The night before the operation, Lyra found herself unable to sleep. She wandered the quiet corridors of the Starshot, eventually making her way to the observation deck. To her surprise, she found Mira there, gazing out at the stars. "Couldn't sleep either?" Lyra asked softly, settling down beside the young girl. Mira shook her head. "I'm worried about you," she admitted. "What if something goes wrong tomorrow?" Lyra felt a surge of affection for this child who had become like a sister to her. "I won't lie to you, Mira. It's going to be dangerous. But sometimes we have to face our fears to overcome them. And I won't be alone. I have my family with me." Mira leaned against her, and they sat in companionable silence, watching the stars drift by. In that moment, Lyra felt a sense of peace settle over her. Whatever happened tomorrow, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. The trap was sprung at dawn. A carefully leaked transmission led Vex and her Crixian allies straight to the abandoned outpost. Lyra stood alone in the central chamber, her heart pounding but her resolve unshaken. When Vex strode in, flanked by Crixian guards, her face twisted into a triumphant sneer. "Oh, little star," she purred. "Did you really think you could outrun your destiny?" Lyra stood tall, meeting her stepmother's gaze without flinching. "My destiny is my own," she said clearly. "You have no power over me anymore." Vex's face contorted with rage. "Seize her," she snarled. But as the Crixian guards moved forward, the trap was sprung. Elias and his team burst from hiding, catching the invaders in a devastating crossfire. Zix's voice came over the comms, reporting that the Starshot had engaged and disabled the Crixian ships in orbit. In the chaos that followed, Lyra found herself face to face with Vex. Her stepmother, realizing her plans were crumbling, lunged at her with a hidden blade, but Lyra was ready. Using the combat skills she had honed over months of training, she disarmed Vex with a swift move, sending the older woman crashing to the ground. As Vex looked up at her, fear replacing the arrogance in her eyes, Lyra felt the last chains of her past falling away. "It's over," she said softly. "You have no power here, not anymore." In the aftermath of the battle, as Vex and the surviving Crixians were taken into custody, Lyra felt a profound sense of closure. She had faced her past, confronted her deepest fears, and emerged stronger for it. Elias found her later as they prepared to leave the outpost. "You did good out there, Starborn," he said, pride evident in his voice. "How do you feel?" Lyra considered the question, looking out at the stars visible through a nearby viewport. "Free," she said finally. "Truly free, for the first time in my life." As the Starshot lifted off, leaving the ghosts of Lyra's past behind, she felt a sense of lightness, of possibility. The future stretched out before her, full of promise and adventure. The battle against the Crixian Imperium was far from over. There were still slaves to free, injustices to fight. But Lyra Starborn was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With her chosen family beside her and the fire of determination burning bright in her heart, she knew that anything was possible. The starship soared into the cosmic night, carrying hope and freedom to the far reaches of the galaxy. And Lyra, once a slave, now stood as a beacon of resilience and compassion, ready to light the way for others trapped in darkness. The journey continued, and the best was yet to come. A new future unfolds. The defeat of Vex and the Crixin forces marked a turning point for the Starshot and its crew. Word of their victory spread like wildfire through the underground networks, igniting hope in the hearts of the oppressed across the galaxy. The Starshot was no longer just a ship. It had become a symbol of resistance, a beacon of freedom in a universe of darkness. In the months that followed, Lyra found herself at the forefront of a growing movement. The skills she had honed, the compassion she had cultivated, and the strength she had discovered within herself all came into play as she helped coordinate an ever-expanding network of safe havens and rescue operations. One crisp morning, as the Starshot orbited a small, azure world on the fringes of known space, Elias called a meeting of the senior crew. As they gathered in the war room, there was an air of anticipation. They all sensed that something big was on the horizon. Elias didn't disappoint. "We've been reactive for too long," he began, his voice firm. "It's time we took the next step. We're not just going to keep rescuing slaves and running. We're going to build something lasting." He activated the holographic display, showing a star system none of them recognized. "This is the Novus system. It's well off the main space lanes, shielded from long-range sensors by a dense nebula. Perfect for what we have in mind." Lyra leaned forward, intrigued. "What exactly do we have in mind, Captain?" Elias smiled, a rare sight that lit up his weathered features. "A home, Lyra. A true sanctuary. Not just a hiding place, but a thriving community where former slaves can rebuild their lives, where we can coordinate our efforts to dismantle the Crixin slave trade once and for all." The idea was audacious, almost unthinkable in its scope, but as Elias laid out the plans, Lyra felt a growing excitement. This wasn't just another mission. This was a chance to create something truly transformative. The work began immediately. The Starshot became a hive of activity as they prepared for the monumental task ahead. Lyra found herself working closely with Zix and Raj, using her intimate knowledge of the needs of former slaves to help design living spaces and community centers. As weeks turned to months, the sanctuary began to take shape. They chose the third planet of the Novus system, a world of rolling hills and vast oceans that they named Haven. The first structures were simple but functional, built with materials ferried in by the Starshot and a growing fleet of allied ships. Lyra was there when the first group of rescued slaves arrived on Haven. She watched with tears in her eyes as they took their first steps on the planet's surface, many of them feeling solid ground beneath their feet for the first time in years. Among them was Mira, no longer the frightened child Lyra had first met, but a confident young woman eager to help others as she had been helped. "It's beautiful," Mira whispered, squeezing Lyra's hand as they looked out over the settlement. "It's like a dream." "Not a dream," Lyra replied softly. "A new beginning." As Haven grew, so did the scope of their operations. The Starshot was no longer alone in its mission. Other ships, crewed by those who had been inspired by their example, joined the cause. They formed a loose alliance, sharing information and resources in their fight against the Crixin Imperium. Lyra found herself taking on more and more responsibility. Her experiences, both as a former slave and as a key member of the Starshot's crew, made her uniquely suited to bridge the gap between the military aspects of their operation and the humanitarian needs of those they rescued. It was Elias who first suggested it during a quiet moment as they watched the sun set over Haven's capital city. "You know, Lyra," he said, his voice thoughtful, "this place needs a leader. Someone who understands what these people have been through, someone who can guide them towards a better future." Lyra looked at him, startled. "You can't mean..." Elias smiled. "I do. You've come so far from that scared girl we rescued. You've become a symbol of hope for so many. I can't think of anyone better suited to lead Haven." The idea was daunting, but as Lyra considered it, she felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was what all her experiences had been leading to, a chance to make a real, lasting difference. The official ceremony was simple but profound. Standing before the assembled population of Haven, with the crew of the Starshot behind her, Lyra took an oath to serve and protect the sanctuary and all who sought refuge there. As she looked out over the crowd, she saw faces filled with hope, with determination, with the promise of a better future. And she knew, with a certainty that ran bone deep, that this was only the beginning. The fight against the Crixian Imperium was far from over. There would be battles ahead, challenges to face, and difficult decisions to make. But now they had a home, a base from which to strike out against injustice and offer hope to those still trapped in darkness. Later that night, Lyra stood on the balcony of the newly constructed government building, looking up at the stars. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a frightened slave to the leader of a burgeoning movement for freedom. She felt a presence beside her and turned to see Elias. No words were needed between them. They stood in companionable silence, mentor and student, friends and comrades, united in their commitment to a shared vision. "What do you think the future holds?" Lyra asked finally, her voice soft in the night air. Elias considered for a moment before answering. "Challenges, certainly. The Crixians won't give up easily. But also hope, Lyra. Thanks to you, thanks to all of us, there's hope." Lyra nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility on her shoulders, but also the strength to bear it. She was no longer alone. She had her family aboard the Starshot, she had the growing community of Haven, and she had the fire of determination that burned brighter than ever in her heart. As the first lights of dawn began to paint the sky, Lyra Starborn looked out over the world she now called home. The girl who had once been betrayed and sold into slavery was gone. In her place stood a leader, a beacon of hope for the oppressed across the galaxy. The future was uncertain, filled with both promise and peril, but Lyra was ready to face it head-on. With her found family beside her and a growing alliance at her back, she would continue the fight for freedom, for justice, for a universe where no one would ever suffer as she had. The story of Lyra Starborn and the Starshot was far from over. In many ways, it was just beginning. But as the sun rose over Haven, casting its warm light over a world built on hope and courage, one thing was certain: the best was yet to come. And so, the legend of Lyra Starborn, the slave who became a savior, the lost girl who found a family among the stars, continued to grow. It spread from planet to planet, a tale of hope in dark times, a promise that no matter how deep the darkness, there would always be those brave enough to light the way towards freedom.